Hi, I'm Igor Smirnov from Remote Chess Academy. In this lesson called Unlocking the Grandmaster's Mind, I'd like to discuss with you a very interesting and important topic: how grandmasters actually think while playing a game of chess. Why is this topic so interesting? When you observe certain top players commenting on their games during a press conference or in any video lesson, usually those guys show you tons of different variations that could happen in various possible lines. It seems like those guys see completely everything. However, it's not necessarily true. The variations that they show you might not relate to the actual thinking process of a chess player. Some of those variations, they are just their home preparation. Some lines they indeed calculated during the game, some lines they discovered while analyzing the game afterwards with their seconds or with a computer, and some variations they will simply never show you because it is their secret weapons which they hope to use in their next games. Therefore, this question remains to be open. Even if you have observed a couple of very interesting variations that could happen in a game of Carlsen or whatever top player, it still doesn't clarify to you exactly how can you find such brilliant moves in your own games within a short amount of time. Next, you may be wondering this question. Okay, it's hard to calculate long lines. At least it's hard to make it right, not to overlook anything. But what about knowing the strategic and tactical motifs, not knowing the typical plans in different openings? What if you just study them and apply? Shouldn't it clarify everything for you? From one hand, of course it should, and it could definitely help, but from the other hand, knowing lots of different things about a chess game pretty often can even add more chaos to your thinking process. There are so many different things you need to keep in mind while playing. You need to care about the center, about the planning, open lines, weak squares. You need to care about the tactical motifs, calculate the variations, evaluate positions, and there are so many different things you need to analyze. The simple, practical question is, how can you do that within just 1-2 minutes of time that you have for one move? Let's have a look at a specific example. It is the game between Najdorf and Polugaevsky, two famous players of the past. Here it is black to move. Imagine that you're playing this position and think for a moment of how would you play here as black. You may even pause the video, think for a moment, and then continue watching the lesson. There are a couple of possibilities for black. Black can, for example, take the pawn on a3, black can maybe push the pawn, black can take the knight on f3, jump with the knight to g4, jump with the knight to d5, maybe do something else, bring the knight back into play with knight c6, and perhaps there are some other possibilities as well. When you face such a situation with so many possible moves, while each of them looks completely logical, it may be really frustrating. The general chess rules don't help you that much because, again, all of these moves are following some chess rules and all of them are logical. The thing you would try to do here is to calculate variations. However, still, it's quite difficult to calculate all of them and to do it accurately because there are so many possibilities both for white and for black on every move of your calculation. Let's say you try to calculate the move knight to g4. Okay, here you will need to calculate the consequences of white's sacrifice on e6 with the knight or maybe with the bishop, and there will be very long and complex lines after that. Again, we're talking about just one possibility that black has in the initial position, knight g4, while apart from that, black has plenty of other options. You see that the situation is really tough. A If you observe an analysis of this game made by a certain top grandmaster, he will show you tons of variations in all of these lines, and in the end will prove that one of these moves is objectively the best. Again, this is rather a theoretical analysis than a practical game decision. During a practical game, you need to play the right move within 1-2 minutes. You don't have time to calculate all those lines accurately. Okay, now let's think, how should you approach this position and find the right move if you're playing the real practical game. The very first thing you should be caring about is the safety of your king, that's for sure. Here we can see the pretty huge concentration of white's forces around black's king. Almost all of the white species, maybe except for the rook in the corner on the a1, are targeting the black's king. If you look at all of the white's minor pieces, the rook on e1, the queen on d3, all of them are looking there in the direction of black's king. All of them are ready to take actions pretty soon. If you see the situation like that, you need to be extremely careful. In such situations, you should know that very often your opponent will have a certain combination. Not necessarily it will appear right now, but it has great chances to appear during one of the following moves. That's why the first thing that black should try to do here is to reduce the concentration of white's forces that look at black's king. With that being said, I like a lot the move b3 that black can play here, because it helps you to neutralize one of the most aggressive white species. The bishop on a2 were looking indirectly onto black's king and could have support white's different sacrifices along this diagonal onto e6. So when you play the move b3, you shut this possibility down for white. Now, which variations do you need to calculate before playing this move? Well, obviously white will take the pawn, most likely. And after that, after a little consideration, you can see that at least black can equalize the game pretty easily. If you just take this bishop, queen takes, now your bishop onto b7 is under the attack, but you can eliminate the knight on f3 in order to capture the pawn on the d4 on the next move. Now you see that a few exchanges has happened, the position was simplified a lot, now you're completely safe, and therefore if you found just this position into your calculation, it already means that you may play that initial move b3. No further calculations are required. Now you can see that when you have the right focus, things become really easy for you. Initially it seemed like black needs to calculate lots of variations here, while in reality you see that it's enough to calculate one short and simple variation. You may be wondering, but what about all other moves black could have played here? Should you calculate the moves like b takes a3, knight to g4, or something else, or bishop takes f3 here? Well, of course, you may spend little time there, but again, you need to be very careful. You need to know that if your opponent has a huge concentration of forces against you, the possibility of the attack and some combinations is really huge for him. So if black really plays something like knight g4, white will probably start with knight takes e6, and although it's not the end of the variation, black is not obliged to take. You can do something else like queen d7, the position is still sharp. But in such variations, there is a big chance that you can overlook something and you can lose. Also, you will have to spend a lot of time for calculating those lines. You may be spending like 10 minutes, 20 minutes for calculating this single variation. There is a big chance that in the end of the game you will end up in a time trouble and can lose the game just because of the time factor. That's why I don't recommend that you go into such lines when you are under the attack, when the position is dangerous, and even though you could balance, but it is so dangerous for you. Okay, let's go back. again, something similar might happen in the line of bishop takes a3, queen takes a3, queen to d4. Again, I'm showing this position just for illustrative purposes. I'm not recommending that you actually go into those calculations. And then knight takes e6, let's say. Again, you see that situation is really complex. I can take the knight, which is probably bad, or maybe take queen takes b2. The position is very difficult to evaluate. Both players has their chances. You need to spend the whole life analyzing those variations, and that's why I don't recommend that you do that. Going back to the beginning and making some intermediate conclusion, we can say that you can play b3 mainly taking into account the key factor. The key factor is the safety of your king, and the idea that you need to decrease the quantity of white pieces focused against your king. Before playing the move b3, it's enough to calculate a short variation after the exchanges of minor pieces, the knights and bishops, which shows you that at least you have the equal game there. Therefore, you can play b3 without any other thinking, and you may play the move like that after just 1 minute of thinking. It's pretty easy. Okay, let's go next. White certainly took the pawn. Now there is the next question for you. How do you play here for black? You can see that there is a big difference between theoretical knowledge about chess and the actual practical thinking process. In theory, you need to take into account all the main strategic and tactical motifs, you need to compose the plans, you need to evaluate different factors of the position, such as king safety, center, open lines, weak squares, prophylaxis, and many other things. Then you need to calculate lots of variations, come up with the candidate moves and calculate each line until the end, and so forth. This is in theory. If we come to practice, in a practical game, you need to play the right move within a few minutes, sometimes within a few seconds. Therefore, you need to think quickly and efficiently. That's why, in order to help you be the great practical player, we have created the course where we summarized how GMs actually think while playing a game of chess. I've cooperated with Maxim Blogi and other grandmasters, my friends. Those guys have spent many years to become strong, experienced players. Now they have summarized it for you within one short and concise course. I'm sure you'll enjoy learning it, and also I'm sure that after learning this course and locking the grandmaster's mind, you will really understand how grandmasters think while playing a chess game, and most importantly, you will be able to do the same. I'm wishing you nice games and pleasant victories. Talk to you soon.